Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear here. And boy, Doug, you got kind of an interesting topic here tonight about the origin of food. Is that the title of our show?
Yes, I was sort of curious about this, and I did some Google searches on this. And what I found out is that nobody really has even addressed this anywhere on the internet that I can figure out.
There is a dearth of information on the origin of food. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I did get was some nonsense about the Neanderthals starting to do farming.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about that, but this is not what I'm interested in discussing, is because without life you have no food, but without food you have no life. And so there's a big problem here for the origin of life scenarios, because except for the thesis that there was some sort of primordial soup, well, where did this primordial soup come from? And so we are I know that we had Esau in his soup that he
bowl of pottage and he sold his birthright for?
Right, but what about the first life? What did we have to get in order to have an environment where not only life could evolve or come about by chance, but continue to live? And what happens when it dies? And and none of this I find is even thought of or discussed anywhere in the scientific literature that I can find.
It's funny because the biblical text is very clear about the origin of food. Well, of course, it's very clear about the origin of everything, but it talks about the seed and the plant things are created for food, and food was created at the same time that animal life was created. Well, it was 1 day, 2 days before, whatever, but it was right about the same time. And so the idea of how it was created or how it came to be is not as big of an issue. It's always an issue for all of these origin problems, Doug, when you discuss anything. How did it come? The old like chicken and egg syndrome. That really happens with everything. You said the same thing about the same circular thing. Without life, there's no food. Without food, there's no life. There's a symbiosis as well. Each one is dependent on the other. It's like this. Maybe it's a little far afield, but I get really, I guess not really, but somewhat annoyed about people trying to eliminate, let's say, greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide.
Right.
When carbon dioxide is what plants thrive on.
Oh yeah.
And when you get a lot of carbon dioxide, plants thrive and grow better, producing, what do they produce, Doug? Oxygen. Yeah, they produce oxygen, which is what we need. And so there's a balance there that seems to come out. There's a symbiotic type of a relationship here, and people who have eliminated a creator from their structure and their thing are always worried about one extreme or the other, not understanding that there has been a balance. Yes, I will acknowledge that some of that balance gets skewed from time to time because of the broken, fallen nature of the world. Again, the biblical text addresses that and tells you what we should be doing. But by and large, it's telling you, like after the flood that happened, that's a major climate change, okay? But we've been told that's never going to happen again.
Right, yeah.
We've been told that's never going to happen again. So we tend to get a little bit complacent. We come up with these Fuji-wooji theories. And you said, Doug, when you looked up origin of food on Google, you get basically gobbledygook. You didn't get much real information. It's all speculative.
And it really doesn't answer the question of how the first life came about and how it actually started feeding on something. Now, I remember seeing a PBS special where you have these hot smokers at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I love those.
These blue-green algae down at the bottom of these, some sort of algae are feeding on this sulfur that's coming out of this smoker, and so it's really a form of of life that really doesn't exist anywhere else. And so these evolutionists seem to pin their hopes on something like that causing.
Well, I remember too, Doug, on another take, they would talk about hybrid type creatures like Euglena, which is sort of has chlorophyll in it or something, but it acts like an animal in a sense. And so they think, well, maybe it's evolving from a plant into an animal. And that's the whole scenario of some of this stuff. There's a lot of other issues that come involved with these things, but those the smoker, the vents and the volcanic things, but you still have an incredible array of complexity and symbiotic relationship between plants and animals. And of course, we're talking about the idea that in a biblical text, plants are not really alive.
Right, yeah.
Plants are not living. They are in a biological sense. We're not saying they're not alive in a biological sense. But sometimes Christians, we tend to conflate the two worldview. We don't understand that when you do that, you suddenly have a self-contradictory thing when the Bible says there was no death before Adam and you're eating plants. Okay? And you say how about the second law of thermodynamics, things breaking down. Things were breaking down before the fall. But there was regenerative processes that were going on that have been broken. Okay, we believe, okay? But the same token, Doug, the idea that we love to eat steaks and tomatoes and and cucumbers and watermelons and apples and we love to eat pork chops and and all those kind of but I'm saying there's all this food stuff, and it all depends on a symbiotic thing. We have to have the plant eaters have to have a lot of plants to eat.
Right. And if you take for example a piece of fruit like an apple or a orange or a pear or anything like that that's on a tree and it's got the seeds contained in it, but it's got all this beautiful fleshy stuff that you can actually eat. Why would a plant want to do that?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you eat the seeds, you poop them out, and then they plant more seeds. So that's the argument. There'll be an argument like that given.
Yeah, there's some sort of anthropomorphism going on
Anthropomorphism, yeah, you get a lot of that, yeah.
And so here are these inanimate or so-called not sentient plants are actually
thinking they want this to be spread. It's programmed in the genome or something that you want to survive. And I go, you're right. That is anthropomorphism. It's like putting human thoughts into a plant. Okay. Well, I guess
I have sort of a challenge for our chemists out there to come up with some substance, taking your off-the-shelf chemicals out of your lab and combining them together to produce a little pill. And in that pill, you can stick it in the ground, and then presumably you can emulate what's in a seed and will cause it to grow just like a plant. Now, I've never seen anybody conduct this experiment.
No, but I've seen some science fiction stories about that where they organically could grow houses. You know what I mean? You grow and you have food in. Oh yeah, cool stories. But that's all they are, Doug.
They're stories.
Because the power of a seed. That's it. And you think about that alone in and of itself. Unless a kernel of wheat goes into the ground and dies, that's a metaphor for Christ dying and coming back to life. But it's a reality. In the physical world, this little thing, it's got all the components to create a tree or a bush or and stuff that can produce fruit or whatever it is. Some of them, of course, don't produce good things because of the curse. They produce thorns and thistles. But the point of it is, all of them have this ability, Doug. There's this compact little thing, and it goes into the ground, and it literally kind of dies. It just kind of falls apart, disintegrates, opens up, and then you have a vine or a tendril growing up, and then out of that gets bigger. And it is an amazing thing when you think about it, and we see it all the time, so we take it for granted, and so those kind of things.
I find also interesting is that they'll produce flowers. Now the flowers in and of itself doesn't really do a whole lot for the plant or for the reproduction of the plant, except that it's beautiful. And so there's sort of like a intrinsic beauty type of thing going on with plants, where it's sort of showing off, well, I'm created by God, I'm going to be beautiful and make life a little bit different here on this.
Yeah, and then the bees that pollinate from some of the flowers, why did they, all these things about, we've talked about this many times in the show, Doug. Mm-hmm. Unless everything works, nothing works.
Right.
If the bee had no flowers,
right.
Okay, but if the flowers had no bees,
right, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. And so they had to evolve at the exact same time, or so close it doesn't make any difference. Or you have to propose some scenario where the flower didn't need to be pollinated by bees for millions of years, or whatever it is, and suddenly, or maybe not suddenly, but over time it develops it. And every missing link, every transitional point is problematic for this thing surviving.
Right.
And
then really the origin of life is something that has to be instantaneous. It's an on-off switch. Either you have it or you don't. And so the millions of years of evolution, where you for all these years you didn't have life, then all of a sudden you do have life.
Cambrian explosion.
Cambrian explosion. Well, it's more than
I know,
more
but
than
I'm just
that. But what I'm saying is that right at the moment where this very first life comes about, you have to then be able to have the food available for it to feed upon. And it's not just the mere chemicals that's in the environment that it appears in. It's got to have all these different types of nutrients and a matrix for it to grow in, and so to imagine a scenario like that where it came about by chance is really problematic.
It takes more faith to believe in that, as we've been heard to say. But Doug, there's something that was kind of, I just looked at your little notes here, the similarity between chlorophyll and hemoglobin.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of fascinating. Obviously, hemoglobin is animal life, mm-hmm. and chlorophyll is plant life. You have prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, mm-hmm. But you said they're similar. There's the structure or the purpose, or what is it that's similar?
Well, they're made up of porphyrins around in the case of hemoglobin is iron in the middle of it.
Okay.
But in the case of chlorophyll is magnesium.
Is that right? Okay.
And so,
yeah, I guess I knew that. Yeah.
And so the thing of that is that it's quite a complicated molecule. It's really not like anything else, but they both have a similar purpose, except the chlorophyll fixates the carbon dioxide and releases oxygen, and the hemoglobin fixes the oxygen and releases carbon dioxide.
Now that is amazing. That is totally amazing. You think of the genius of that. That just screams creation.
And here you have these two different sides of things, the chlorophyll and hemoglobin, both screaming similar design. They got some different side chains. The chlorophyll has a longer side chain, but the hemoglobin and the chlorophyll are very similar in the way that they behave and act, and but they have two different heavy metals in the middle of them.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And so it's really quite fascinating. There's a fellow that is in one of the Bible studies that we've been in, Bart Luke's Bible study.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing his PhD thesis, doing three-dimensional modeling of these.
Oh, that might be interesting, yeah.
And so I've got a copy of his thesis on the PowerPoint, and it's a little bit complicated over my head, but I understood what's going on, And, I also issued him a challenge is that not only he needs to do it in 3D, he needs to do it in 4D.
Yeah, you mentioned that last week. Yeah, that would be.
And so that'd be kind of cool to see if that could be done, because what happens is that the behavior of it in 4 dimensions, which means over time, it's going to change and do certain things.
Well, it anticipates. It anticipates. Isn't it? I mean, it's like the 4th dimension is time.
Right.
And so before it actually needs something, it's anticipating something that's going to need it.
Right, yeah.
Is that what you're? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
It
a little
is,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so in order to, so chlorophyll really has to come about before you really have any bacteria or any animal life and so really that's what the Bible talks about in the 3rd day is the herb bringing forth seed and fruit, and that was all there ready to go right there at the beginning.
Right.
And you have to have it instantaneously. And that would be beg the question is that if this is indeed the case of what they believe about evolution and the origin of life, then you can emulate it. You can because it's not millions of years.
Yeah.
You can't hide behind the millions of years.
It can't be.
You should be able to chemically reproduce what's going on and emulate what it is using your off-the-shelf chemicals that you would have had in your origin of life scenarios.
Yeah.
And but you have the methane, ammonia, hydrogen gas scenario that Miller and Urey put together to create the first.
And they pretty much discounted that because the earliest rocks that we have are impregnated with oxygen. So there's so oxygen goes way
well,
way
but
back.
you know that we had the great oxygenation event.
Yeah. See, I get a little bit irritated with ad hoc explanations every time they turn around because you come up with some objection and they come up with some ad hoc, and again, if it was reasonable, but they're made up out of whole cloth, most of these explanations. Doug, what about this, the digestion of food? How would that have ever evolved?
Yeah,
Because, see, Doug, the thing what I'm saying, plants maybe could have been around, but how did animals develop the mechanisms to digest? And then let's go something even weirder. Things like Venus flytraps and the pitcher plants that actually digest animals like flies, or they digest insects and things. And why would plants have developed such a thing as that if they were around for millions of years or hundreds of thousands?
Well, it's like the koala and the eucalyptus tree.
Yeah.
So you have it sort of. That's the only thing it dines on is this eucalyptus tree, and
it looks like a big carnivore.
Yeah,
but it's a plant eater. Yep.
But so you have a lot of different mechanisms that go into actual eating, and you ask the question, well, where did the food come from? Well, it comes from restaurants. And,
it's like chocolate milk comes from brown cows. I know. Yeah.
No, silly cows,
Yeah.
But silly cow milk. But, all this stuff is so interdependent that in order to explain its origin, you really have to set your brain off into some area, take it out of your head and put it someplace else so you can come up with something.
Doug, I mean, the whole idea of the digestive juices, the people are worried, oh, if you drink stuff, it'll be bad for your stomach. Yeah, we can have things happen to your stomach, but the acid in your stomach, Doug, is like 15 times more powerful than almost any. I mean, how does that stomach lining actually take care of the acid? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, that's an amazing thing, how you would have developed. It's like, Doug, think about the bombardier beetle. How do two chemicals, that are independent of each other inside the bombardier beetle's body, but when it hits the air, it basically gets hot to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't ignite, but it gets really hot. But it's our body has chemicals inside of us that you want to talk about counterintuitive. Why would you? I mean, the idea that like Coca-Cola has nothing compared to what your own stomach acid has. It has nothing.
Right, yeah.
Okay, You know, stomach acid, what is it? I've heard it's 15 times, this may not be right, but 15 times more powerful than sulfuric acid. I don't know, it's like really powerful. It's really strong.
If you want to know what a stomach acid is like, you just vomit.
Yeah, anybody knows that. It is not designed to come up that way. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. But the stuff that the stomach acid is so powerful, it breaks down the nutrients, and then it comes into your body. The breaking down of the nutrients, and then your body takes what it needs, and then you've got another system developed to get rid of waste materials, the stuff that doesn't need. It's fascinating, Doug. I know biochemists have gone into this for years, but you think about it, man, how complicated it really is.
Something else that's counterintuitive is, why would it be a good idea to cook food?
Oh yeah,
because you would probably want the food in the more natural state for it to be absorbed quite a bit. But if you cook the food, it's a little bit easier to eat and tastes better. And the question is, why did it come about by chance like that to bring about?
Well, there are things that you wonder because they may be. They're man-generated, Doug, but they weren't like language, cooking food, which foods that are healthy and which ones aren't. How do we know? How did they ever learn it back in the day? I think some of it was given by revelation. Some of it was trial and error. Obviously, people ate plants and died. Sometimes the plants were not, especially after the fall. But I've always been fascinated how people over the centuries have developed recipes and plants and animals to cook and change. So that you can kind of understand. But there had to be a beginning source of the information, Doug. You know?
And when you look at it, God had given everything as good food, good to eat.
Yeah.
And so there was probably no poisonous plants at all.
I would say probably not before the fall.
And so what you have is poisonous plants or mutations or corruptions of the original genome.
Yep.
And and this is something you take a look at. Take for example, the cause of the disease tetanus. There's a bacterium called Clostridium tetani, which is the cause of tetanus.
Say that 3 times real fast.
Clostridium tetani. Yeah. But it is actually a mutation of a more common bacterium that's beneficial.
Okay.
And so what you have is this, instead of producing something that's good for you, it's producing some toxins. And even in certain cases, the toxins can be beneficial in small amounts.
Yeah, you told me about that years ago, where there was some things that I remember when they were railing against something called Leia Trail years ago that might be beneficial, could help stop some cancers and stuff. I remember an old comedian named Red Buttons that was really high on it and stuff like that. And they got off on the idea because it had the apple seeds or the apricot seeds had some cyanide in it. And you said, well, your body needs a little trace element of it because it stops things from getting out of hand or whatever it is. And I go, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then even on a more direct thing, how about people using snake venoms to cure people of snake bites and some other things? So there's a lot of counterintuitive things. What I rejoice in, Doug, is even in this I talk about a lot that the world is broken. The handiwork of God can be seen even in this broken world. Eye has not seen or ear heard the great things God has prepared for those who love Him. But even in this world, the Lord has given a lot of amazing things. And I think He rejoices when scientists and human beings discover His creation and find new things to help cure diseases or make food better tasting or make it better to eat or make more of it. All these kinds of things, as well as all the other kind of things that we can research and study. I think he gets a great joy in that. Despite the fact that we are living in a broken world, I think the Lord is very happy. But what I don't think He's happy about is the fact that so often I have done this thing this is my discovery. This is my creation. I got my name on the textbook. And I go, and the Lord doesn't care so much about that, but it's just like, give God the glory for what He's made. It's an amazing world. He's created this thing.
I think that this whole thing about food and the fact that there is this cycle where you have plants and actually animals that give up their pieces of their life for our food.
Oh yeah,
it's
that's the old joke, Doug. You got the pig and the chicken saying, "Well, I give sacrifices." He says, "Yeah, but an egg is not quite the same as a slab of bacon." You know, that pig gives up his life where the chicken gives up an egg. You know,
that's right.
quite the same thing. So, but animals do. Yeah, I mean, and but Doug, we're getting low on time here. But there was a couple of things here you listed down here. There are many different kinds of times of digestion. And I didn't realize that. What do you mean?
Well, like for example, if you take the cow's stomach, there's actually 4 stomachs.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so the cow will chew its cud, and it comes back up. He chews it again, and
some birds eat stones to help them with digestion, which is weird to me. They call them gastroliths or something, or they're like stones in their stomach
and the lobster will pick up a little bit of sand, and it ends up in their balance mechanisms.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was David Menton did an experiment where he put a lobster in a tank that had iron filings in it. And then you take a magnet and to do this, and it sort of flip over and do things like that.
Oh, really?
It was really kind of an amazing thing. But what it does is that there's little round particles in each of our inner ear that does the balance, and we have them. But certain creatures actually pick it up from their environment and put it in their ear. It's kind of.
And last but not least, Doug, or say, waste not, want not.
Yeah, intestines.
Intestines are designed for the elimination of waste.
Yeah, and the question is, what happens? After the waste is gone, you have organisms that are ready to pick it up and break down that waste and put it all
recycle it back into use.
Back into use. It's kind of a interesting cycle. If one piece of it was missing,
it would all break down.
It wouldn't even work. And so the case for an instant creation is something that I think is a very, very powerful argument for the biblical model and against evolution. Well, we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution. We hope you enjoyed our show on About Food today.